The night my husband told me his mother deserved my restaurant more than I did, the smell of roasted garlic was still clinging to my coat. I remember that detail because it felt cruelly ordinary. Garlic, olive oil, warm bread, everything I'd worked for wrapped itself around me like comfort, while the words he spoke stripped me bare. I stood in our kitchen, keys still in my hand, listening to him talk as if my dream were a misplaced object he'd decided to return. "She's sacrificed more than you," he said quietly. "This should be hers." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him, or maybe my ears were still ringing from the long day, from the hiss of the espresso machine and the low murmur of contractors arguing over tile choices. I set my purse down slowly, the leather making a soft thud against the counter, and waited for him to laugh, to say he was joking. He didn't. The clock above the fridge ticked, steady and loud, and suddenly I realized my hands were shaking. But to understand why those words cut so deep, you need to know what that restaurant meant to me and who I was before it ever existed. Before the contracts, before the keys with my name etched into the tag, my life followed a quiet, predictable rhythm. I was 42, married for 17 years, no children by circumstance rather than choice. I worked as a catering manager for a mid-sized event company, the kind of job that keeps you on your feet, hands always smelling faintly of lemon and soap. I was good at it. People trusted me with weddings, funerals, milestone birthdays. Their important moments passed through my hands, and I treated them gently. My husband, Daniel, worked in logistics. He liked things orderly, predictable. He liked dinners on time and weekends planned 2 weeks in advance. He liked to say we balanced each other out, my warmth, his practicality. And for a long time, I believed him. Sundays were for his mother, Irene. She lived 10 minutes away in a narrow house that always smelled faintly of mothballs and boiled cabbage. Irene was the kind of woman who measured love in sacrifice. Every story she told began with what she'd given up, her youth, her health, her happiness for her son. "I worked 2 jobs," she'd remind us, pressing more food onto Daniel's plate even when he shook his head, "so you could have everything." I never argued with that. It was true. She had struggled. She'd raised him alone after his father left, and that kind of hardship leaves marks on a person. I respected her for it. I really did. But respect didn't mean surrender. When I married Daniel, I married into a family where gratitude was expected, not offered. Irene never said thank you when I brought dessert or helped clean up. She nodded, as if my effort were simply the natural order of things. "She's old-fashioned," Daniel would say when I mentioned it, his voice gentle but firm. "That's just how she is." And I told myself love meant patience. The idea of owning my own restaurant had lived quietly inside me for years, like a folded note tucked away in a drawer. I didn't talk about it much. Dreams can feel fragile when spoken aloud, especially when you've spent most of your adult life being practical. But I loved food, not just cooking it, understanding it, the way flavors could hold memories, the way a simple meal could make someone feel seen. Late at night after Daniel fell asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, scrolling through listings, sketching menus in a notebook. I imagined a small place, warm lighting, no televisions, just honest food and space for people to breathe. I saved quietly. Extra shifts, bonuses, money from catering gigs I took on my own. Daniel knew I was saving, but I don't think he ever believed I'd actually do it. Until the day I did. The building used to be a bakery, long abandoned, windows dusty but bones still strong. When the realtor unlocked the door and sunlight poured in, I felt it in my chest, a tightening, a knowing. "This is it," I whispered, my voice echoing softly off the bare walls. I signed the papers 3 weeks later. I remember calling Daniel from the parking lot, my hands slick with sweat, my heart pounding. "I did it," I said. "I bought it." There was a pause on the line, not long, but long enough. "You're serious," he finally said. "I am." Another pause. Then, "Okay, we'll talk tonight." That should have been my first clue. At first, he was supportive in the ways that didn't cost him anything. He helped me move boxes, nodded through my plans, told his coworkers his wife is opening a little place downtown. Irene, on the other hand, barely looked at me when Daniel mentioned it over Sunday dinner. "A restaurant," she said, her lips pursed. "At your age?" I smiled, kept my voice light. "It's never too late to start something you love." She snorted softly. "We'll see." Still, I pushed forward. Long days, longer nights, choosing tiles, arguing with vendors, burning my fingers testing recipes. I'd come home exhausted, my feet aching, my clothes smelling of onions and sweat. Daniel began eating dinner alone. "You're never here anymore," he said one night, not looking up from his plate. "I'm building something," I replied, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "It won't be like this all the time." He nodded, but his jaw was tight. I didn't notice how often he visited his mother during those weeks, or how his questions shifted from curiosity to calculation. "How much did that cost? Did you really need that equipment? Are you sure this is worth it?" I told myself it was stress. Change does that to people. The opening day was set, invitations printed, soft jazz playlist ready. I walked through the space alone the night before, running my fingers along the smooth edge of the counter, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. I thought of all the meals that would be served there, all the stories that would unfold. I didn't know one of them would be mine. That night when I came home smelling of garlic and hope, Daniel was waiting at the kitchen table. Irene had been there earlier, her teacup still in the sink. He looked up at me, his eyes tired but resolved. And that's when he said it. "My mom deserves that restaurant more than you do." The words settled between us, heavy and final. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Not yet. For a long moment after Daniel spoke, neither of us moved. The kitchen light hummed softly above us, that faint electrical buzz you only notice when the room goes quiet. I set my keys down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter what little control I had left. "What do you mean?" I asked finally. My voice surprised me. It didn't sound angry. It sounded tired. Daniel exhaled through his nose and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms the way he did when he'd already made up his mind. "I mean exactly what I said. She deserves something of her own. She's worked her whole life and has nothing to show for it." I stared at him, waiting for him to add something, a clarification, an apology. Instead, he kept going. "You know how much she sacrificed," he said. "She gave up everything for me, and now you're pouring all this money into a business that could fail." "It's my money," I said quietly. He flinched, just slightly. "We're married. There's no such thing as your money." I felt something tighten in my chest. I had heard that phrase before, but never like this, never as a weapon. "I saved for years, you know that. I didn't touch our joint account." "That doesn't matter," he replied. "You're still part of this family." Family. The word landed wrong. "And how does giving the restaurant to your mother help us?" I asked. He looked down at the table, tracing an invisible line with his finger. "She could run it. Or we could put it in her name. That way if things go south, at least it stays in the family." I laughed then, a short, hollow sound that surprised both of us. "In the family," I repeated. "You mean in your family." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Don't make this into something it's not." I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat down across from him, my legs suddenly weak. "Irene has never worked a day in a restaurant. She doesn't even like eating out." "She raised me alone," she snapped. "She deserves security." "So do I," said. The words hung in the air, fragile and true. He didn't respond. That night I slept on the couch, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. My mind kept replaying his words,
turning them over like stones, searching for some angle that didn't cut. In the morning, he left early. No goodbye, just the sound of the door closing, firm and final. I went to the restaurant anyway. The place was quiet, sunlight slanting through the front windows, dust motes floating like tiny hopeful things. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing deeply. This space still belonged to me. I needed to feel that. As I walked through the kitchen, checking inventory, testing burners, I tried to steady my thoughts. Daniel was stressed, that was all. Irene had gotten into his head. She had a way of doing that, planting seeds of guilt and letting them grow wild. I told myself we'd talk it through. Reason would win. But doubt has a way of sneaking in when you least expect it. Later that afternoon, as I was reviewing invoices at the counter, my phone buzzed. A text from Irene. "Daniel told me about the restaurant. We need to talk." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. My stomach tightened. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. Her house looked the same as always, curtains drawn, porch light on even in daylight. When I stepped inside, the familiar smell of boiled cabbage hit me, sharp and heavy. She was sitting at the small kitchen table, hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't offer me a seat. "So," she said, her eyes cool, "you bought yourself a restaurant?" "Yes," I replied, "I did." She nodded slowly, as if weighing something. "And you didn't think to include family?" "I am family," I replied. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You married into it." There it was. "Irene," I began carefully, "this is something I've worked toward for a long time. And I worked my fingers to the bone for my son," she shot back. "While you were dreaming, I was surviving." I swallowed. "I respect what you've done, truly, but that doesn't mean I deserve anything?" she interrupted. "That doesn't mean you deserve this," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. She leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Daniel agrees with me." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "He told me you're being selfish, that you're putting your pride before family." I stood up. "This conversation is over." "Think carefully," she said, her tone suddenly soft. "A woman without children should be grateful for what she has. Don't ruin your marriage over a building." The words stung more than I expected. I left without another word. That evening, Daniel didn't come home until late. When he did, he smelled faintly of Irene's house, cabbage and stale tea. He avoided my eyes. "She talked to you, didn't she?" I asked. He sighed. "She's upset." "So am I said. He rubbed his temples. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Something inside me went still. "Are you asking me to give her the restaurant?" I asked. He hesitated. "I'm asking you to consider it." There it was, plain and undeniable. I looked at the man I'd built a life with, searching for the partner I thought I knew. Instead, I saw a son afraid of disappointing his mother. "I need time," I said quietly. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "That's all I'm asking." But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. Time wasn't what they were giving me. It was what they were taking. In the days that followed, nothing was said outright, but everything felt different. Daniel moved through the house like a guest who planned to stay, polite, distant. He asked about my day without really listening to the answer. When I talked about the restaurant, his responses were short, clipped, as if each detail annoyed him. "How much longer until it opens?" he asked one morning, not looking up from his coffee. 2 weeks, I said. He nodded. Good. But there was no warmth in it, just calculation. I started noticing small things, a drawer in my home office left slightly open, papers not where I remembered putting them, the faint feeling that my space was being quietly examined. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress has a way of turning shadows into threats. Still, I began locking my files in a cabinet at the restaurant, deeds, contracts, licenses. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct.
One afternoon, while I was reviewing the menu with my chef, my phone buzzed again. Daniel, did you add my name to the business paperwork? I stared at the message, my chest tightening. No, I typed back. Why? The reply came quickly. Just asking. Just asking. 2 words that felt heavier than they should have. That evening, he brought up finances over dinner. Carefully, casually. You know, if anything happened to you, he said, cutting into his chicken, I wouldn't have any say in what happens to the restaurant. I looked at him. What do you mean? We're married, he said. It makes sense to protect each other. Protect or control? I asked before I could stop myself. His fork paused midair. That's not fair. Then explain why this suddenly matters so much, I said. He set the fork down, his appetite gone. My mother is getting older. And, I pressed, and she needs security, he said. You're in a position to provide that. I leaned back in my chair. By giving her my business? By sharing, he corrected. I laughed softly. You don't share something by taking it away from the person who built it. The room went quiet. He stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I don't want to fight, but you're being stubborn. There it was again, stubborn, the word they used when a woman refused to fold herself smaller. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay awake thinking about all the times I'd compromised without realizing it, the promotions I'd turned down because they required travel Daniel didn't like, the holidays spent at Irene's house, even when I was exhausted, the way my dreams had always come second, tucked neatly behind everyone else's needs. The restaurant wasn't just a business. It was proof that I was allowed to want something for myself. A week before opening, my lawyer called. Have you authorized any changes to your business structure? She asked. My heart skipped. No? Why? There was an inquiry, she said. Someone requested information about transferring ownership. My hands went cold. Who? She hesitated. Your husband. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The sounds of the restaurant, pots clanging, voices calling orders, faded into a dull hum. I have no authority, I finally said. I know, she replied. Nothing has been done, but I thought you should be aware. I thanked her and hung up, my fingers trembling. When I confronted Daniel that night, he didn't deny it. I was just exploring options, he said, his tone defensive. You're overreacting. You went behind my back, I said. You tried to take something that isn't yours. I'm your husband, he snapped. That makes it mine, too. No, I said quietly. It doesn't. His face hardened. You've changed. I looked at him, really looked at him. I think I finally stopped disappearing. He didn't respond. The opening night came anyway. Friends, former clients, neighbors, the room filled with laughter and clinking glasses. The food was perfect, the energy electric. I moved through the space like I belonged there, because I did. Daniel arrived late. Irene was with him. She wore a stiff smile, eyes scanning the room as if assessing her inheritance. Well, she said, standing beside me at the bar, I suppose it's charming. I smiled back. Thank you for coming. Daniel leaned in, his voice low. We need to talk. Not tonight, I said. It's important. So is this, I replied, gesturing to the room. For once, let me have this. His eyes flicked to his mother, then back to me. Something passed between them, a silent agreement. That night, after the last guest left and the lights were dimmed, Daniel confronted me again. She should be part of this, he said. She's family. So am I said, exhaustion weighing on my bones. He sighed, frustration clear. If you won't do the right thing, I don't know how we move forward. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Neither do I said. For the first time since this began, I allowed myself to consider a future where I didn't bend, and that thought scared me, but it also felt like freedom. The morning after the opening, I woke up before dawn.
Daniel was already gone. His side of the bed was cold, the sheets pulled tight as if he'd made a point of not disturbing me. For a moment, I lay there listening to the quiet hum of the house, the refrigerator clicking on and off, the distant sound of a car passing outside. It felt like the pause before something breaks. I made coffee and drank it standing by the window, watching the sky lighten. My phone buzzed again, this time not from Daniel. It was Irene. "We need to settle this before you embarrass the family." I didn't reply. At the restaurant, the staff congratulated me again, their smiles warm and genuine. I thanked them, laughed where I was supposed to, but my mind felt split, half present, half bracing. Around noon, Daniel showed up. He stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking around like he was measuring the place. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded. "Okay." We stepped into the small office at the back. He closed the door. "She's been crying. She feels humiliated." "By what?" I asked. "By the fact that I didn't hand her something she didn't earn?" "She feels pushed aside," he said, "like you don't respect her." I took a breath. "Respect doesn't mean surrender." He shook his head. "You're choosing this restaurant over your marriage." "No," I said softly, "you're asking me to give up my identity to prove my loyalty." He stared at me, his eyes searching my face. "If you loved me—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't finish that sentence." Silence stretched between us. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to stop trying to take this from me. I want you to see me as your partner, not your mother's resource." His jaw clenched. "I can't abandon her." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you not to sacrifice me." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked out. That evening, I received a call from my lawyer again. "Your mother-in-law contacted our office," she said carefully. "She claims there was a verbal agreement regarding ownership." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "There was no such agreement." "I know, but I want you to be prepared. This may get ugly." After we hung up, I sat alone in the restaurant, the lights low, chairs stacked, the smell of yesterday's bread still lingered. I pressed my palms against the counter, grounding myself. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. It was a battle over autonomy. Daniel didn't come home that night. He sent a text instead. "I'm staying with my mom for a while. We both need space." I read it twice, then set the phone down. Space. Another word that sounded generous, but felt like abandonment. Days passed. Business picked up. Reviews came in, positive, glowing. Strangers praised the food, the atmosphere. They didn't know the cost behind it. Daniel stopped by occasionally, always when Irene wasn't with him. Our conversations were stiff, careful. "She's still asking," he said one afternoon. "She feels you're influenced." "By who?" I asked. "By ambition," he replied. I smiled sadly. Imagine that. The final straw came a week later. Irene showed up unannounced during lunch service. She stood at the host stand, her purse clutched tightly, eyes sharp. "I want to speak to the owner," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "That's me," I replied, stepping forward. Her gaze swept over me. "We need to talk. Privately." I led her to the office, my heart pounding. "This is tearing my family apart. And for what? Your ego?" "This is my livelihood and my dream. You could have had security," she snapped, "a place in this family." "I already had that, or at least I thought I did." She leaned in, her voice low and sharp. "Daniel will choose me." I met her eyes. "Then he already has." She left without another word. That night, Daniel came home. He stood in the doorway, looking older somehow, tired. "She's threatening legal action," he said. "I know." He sat down heavily. "This is too much." "It doesn't have to be," I said.
You can stop it." He looked up at me. "By giving her what she wants?" I shook my head. "No, by standing with me." The silence that followed was answer enough. "I think we should separate," he said quietly. My chest tightened, but I nodded. "I think you're right." The next weeks were a blur of paperwork and quiet grief. He moved out. The house felt cavernous without him. But something else happened too. I felt lighter. The restaurant thrived. I poured myself into it, not as an escape, but as an affirmation. One afternoon, a regular customer stopped me near the bar. "You built something special here," she said. I smiled. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You seem strong." I thought about that. Maybe strength isn't something you're born with. Maybe it's something you grow when you finally stop giving yourself away. The morning after the opening, I woke up before dawn. Daniel was already gone. His side of the bed was cold, the sheets pulled tight as if he'd made a point of not disturbing me. For a moment, I lay there listening to the quiet hum of the house, the refrigerator clicking on and off, the distant sound of a car passing outside. It felt like the pause before something breaks. I made coffee and drank it standing by the window, watching the sky lighten. My phone buzzed again, this time not from Daniel. It was Irene. "We need to settle this before you embarrass the family." I didn't reply. At the restaurant, the staff congratulated me again, their smiles warm and genuine. I thanked them, laughed where I was supposed to, but my mind felt split, half present, half bracing. Around noon, Daniel showed up. He stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking around like he was measuring the place. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked over. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded. "Okay." We stepped into the small office at the back. He closed the door. "She's been crying. She feels humiliated." "By what?" I asked. "By the fact that I didn't hand her something she didn't earn?" "She feels pushed aside," he said, "like you don't respect her." I took a breath. "Respect doesn't mean surrender." He shook his head. "You're choosing this restaurant over your marriage." "No," I said softly, "you're asking me to give up my identity to prove my loyalty." He stared at me, his eyes searching my face. "If you loved me—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't finish that sentence." Silence stretched between us. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to stop trying to take this from me. I want you to see me as your partner, not your mother's resource." His jaw clenched. "I can't abandon her." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you not to sacrifice me." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked out. That evening, I received a call from my lawyer again. "Your mother-in-law contacted our office," she said carefully. "She claims there was a verbal agreement regarding ownership." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "There was no such agreement." "I know, but I want you to be prepared. This may get ugly." After we hung up, I sat alone in the restaurant, the lights low, chairs stacked, the smell of yesterday's bread still lingered. I pressed my palms against the counter, grounding myself. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. It was a battle over autonomy. Daniel didn't come home that night. He sent a text instead. "I'm staying with my mom for a while. We both need space." I read it twice, then set the phone down. Space. Another word that sounded generous, but felt like abandonment. Days passed. Business picked up. Reviews came in, positive, glowing. Strangers praised the food, the atmosphere. They didn't know the cost behind it. Daniel stopped by occasionally, always when Irene wasn't with him. Our conversations were stiff, careful. "She's still asking," he said one afternoon. "She feels you're influenced." "By who?" I asked. "By ambition," he replied. I smiled sadly. Imagine that. The final straw came a week later. Irene showed up unannounced during lunch service.
She stood at the host stand, her purse clutched tightly, eyes sharp. "I want to speak to the owner," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "That's me," I replied, stepping forward. Her gaze swept over me. "We need to talk. Privately." I led her to the office, my heart pounding. "This is tearing my family apart. And for what? Your ego? This is my livelihood and my dream. You could have had security," she snapped, "a place in this family." I already had that, or at least I thought I did. She leaned in, her voice low and sharp. "Daniel will choose me." I met her eyes. "Then he already has." She left without another word. That night, Daniel came home. He stood in the doorway, looking older somehow, tired. "She's threatening legal action," he said. "I know." He sat down heavily. "This is too much." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "You can stop it." He looked up at me. "By giving her what she wants?" I shook my head. "No, by standing with me." The silence that followed was answer enough. "I think we should separate," he said quietly. My chest tightened, but I nodded. "I think you're right." The next weeks were a blur of paperwork and quiet grief. He moved out. The house felt cavernous without him. But something else happened, too. I felt lighter. The restaurant thrived. I poured myself into it, not as an escape, but as an affirmation. One afternoon, a regular customer stopped me near the bar. "You built something special here," she said. I smiled. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You seem strong." I thought about that. Maybe strength isn't something you're born with. Maybe it's something you grow when you finally stop giving yourself away.
The truth has a way of spreading, even when no one announces it. People in our small community began to notice that Danielle was no longer around. They noticed Irene sitting alone at church, her posture stiff, her mouth tight with unsaid things. They noticed me, still married on paper for a while, but standing alone behind my counter, calm and unashamed. At first, the whispers bothered me. I'd hear my name lowered in grocery store aisles, feel pauses in conversation when I walked into familiar places. Some people looked at me with sympathy, others with suspicion. "She chose money over family," someone said once, not quietly enough. I didn't correct them. I learned that dignity doesn't always mean defending yourself. Sometimes it means letting people reveal who they are by what they believe. The real shift came unexpectedly. One Saturday evening, the restaurant was full. The hum of conversation rose and fell like a tide. I was at the bar helping pour wine when the door opened and Daniel stepped inside. Not alone. With him was a woman I didn't recognize, mid-40s, neat hair, eyes that avoided mine. They paused just inside the door, unsure. Every muscle in my body tensed. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steady. Daniel swallowed. "We're here to eat." "Of course," I said. "Table for two?" The woman finally looked at me then. Her gaze flickered with discomfort, then curiosity. "Yes," she said softly. I led them to a small table near the back. My heart pounded, but my steps didn't falter. As I set down menus, Daniel cleared his throat. "Irene insisted we come." I met his eyes. "She's not here." He nodded. "She wanted to see it, to understand." I gave a small smile. "Then tell her she's welcome, as a guest." The woman shifted in her seat. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "I didn't realize." "You don't need to explain," I replied gently. They ate quietly. When they left, Daniel lingered. "She's helping my mother now, around the house." "I hope it works out," I replied honestly. He nodded. "You were right, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About standing your ground," he said. "I should have done that years ago." I considered him for a moment. It's never too late to learn, just sometimes too late to keep the people you hurt. He accepted that without argument. The following week, something unexpected happened. A local paper ran a small feature on the restaurant, "Woman-Owned Business Brings Warmth to Downtown." They interviewed me in the quiet hours before lunch service. "Was it hard doing this on your own?" the reporter asked. I thought about the question carefully. It was harder giving myself permission. The work was the easy part. The article spread faster than I expected. Messages came in, women thanking me, sharing pieces of their own stories of being sidelined, overlooked, asked to sacrifice without question. I read every one. One message stayed with me. "I left my marriage after reading about you. I didn't know I was allowed to choose myself." I cried over that message quietly after closing time. That night, Irene called. I almost didn't answer. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice tired but firm. She sighed, a sound heavy with age and disappointment. I saw the article. "And?" I asked. "And you made me look like a villain," she said. "I didn't mention you." Silence. "I suppose," she said slowly, "I raised my son to believe I should always come first." "That's not the same as love," I said gently. Another pause. "I don't know how to be anything else," she admitted. For the first time, I heard something human in her voice, not remorse exactly, but uncertainty. "I hope you find peace," I said. She hung up without responding. I didn't expect reconciliation. I didn't need it. What I needed, I already had. The restaurant continued to grow. I expanded the menu, hired more staff. I laughed easily now without checking who might disapprove. One evening, as I locked up, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. I looked different, not younger, not prettier, stronger. And for the first time in a long while, I liked the woman looking back at me. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic apologies. Most of the time, it slips in quietly, disguised as routine, as ordinary mornings, as the steady knowledge that you are no longer bracing yourself for the next disappointment. I noticed it one Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush had ended, and the restaurant had settled into that soft in-between hour. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor, catching dust in the air. The espresso machine hissed gently behind the counter. I was standing near the window reviewing invoices when I realized my shoulders weren't tight. That used to be my default state, braced, guarded, prepared to explain myself. Now, I was just standing there, breathing. I thought about Daniel less and less. When I did, it wasn't with anger. It was with a quiet understanding of how two people can love each other and still be wrong together. He wasn't a monster. He was a man shaped by a mother who taught him that loyalty meant obedience and fear meant love. And I had been shaped too, by years of learning to be agreeable, flexible, grateful for scraps of approval. The difference was that I had finally chosen to unlearn it. One afternoon, my accountant stopped by to go over quarterly numbers. She slid the folder across the table, smiling. "You're doing better than projected," she said. "Much better." I flipped through the pages, my heart lifting with each line. Profit, stability, growth. "I was told this was a foolish risk," I said quietly. She laughed. "Most women are." That stayed with me. Around that time, my sister came to visit. She'd watched the whole situation unfold from a distance, careful not to take sides, while still worrying about me. "You seem lighter," she said as we sat at the bar after closing, sharing a slice of cake. "I feel lighter," I replied. She hesitated. "Do you ever miss him?" I thought about it honestly. I miss who I was before I realized I was allowed to say no. She nodded. That makes sense. The house changed too.
I repainted the bedroom, donated clothes I'd worn to please someone else, moved furniture without asking permission. It was strange how revolutionary those small acts felt. One evening, as I was sorting through old boxes, I found a notebook, one of the early ones. The pages were filled with menu ideas, sketches, little notes written in the margins. One day, I'd written in careful handwriting, "I'll have a place where people feel welcome." I pressed my hand flat against the page and smiled. That dream had survived everything. The final encounter with Daniel came unexpectedly. He showed up one afternoon while the restaurant was closed, standing awkwardly by the door. He looked thinner, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. "You heard you're expanding?" he said. "I am," I replied. "Small steps." He nodded, hands clasped together. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry." I studied his face, searching for a defensiveness, for conditions. I didn't find any. "I should have protected you," he continued. "Instead, I tried to hand you over like something that could be managed." I didn't interrupt. "He thought being a good son meant never saying no," he said. "I didn't realize how much I was losing until there was nothing left to save." The old version of me would have rushed to comfort him, to soften the moment. This version stayed still. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I accept your apology." Relief washed over his face. "Does that mean—" "It means I forgive you," I said gently, "not that I want to go back." He swallowed. "I understand." We stood there in silence for a moment, two people acknowledging the shape of an ending. As he left, I felt no urge to chase after him. Only peace. A month later, I hosted a small celebration at the restaurant. Nothing formal, just staff, friends, regulars, music playing softly, glasses raised, laughter echoing off the walls. At one point, I stepped back and watched them all, the conversations, the warmth, the easy joy. This place wasn't just mine. It was built from every moment I chose myself. I thought about Irene then and the kind of fear that makes people cling too tightly. I wished her well from a distance. Some lessons aren't mine to teach. That night, as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I paused. I rested my hand on the handle and took a deep breath. There was a time when I thought love required me to disappear, to hand over my dreams so someone else could feel secure. I know better now. Love that costs you your voice is not love. Family that demands your erasure is not family. And success earned through self-betrayal is not success at all. I didn't lose a husband. I gained a life.
After Daniel left that day, the restaurant felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just settled, like a lake after a storm finally stops arguing with the wind. I stood behind the counter for a long time, running a clean cloth over the same spot again and again, not because it needed it, but because my hands needed something to do. Apologies, even sincere ones, have a way of stirring old sediment. They don't hurt the way betrayal does, but they remind you of how deep the water once was. That evening, I closed early. I went home and cooked for myself. Nothing fancy. Pasta with olive oil, garlic, and chili flakes. The same simple dish I used to make on nights when money was tight and dreams felt far away. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. As I ate at the small table by the window, I realized something quietly astonishing. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not for Daniel to come back, not for Irene to soften, not for permission. That waiting had shaped so much of my adult life, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be approved, waiting for the right time to want more. I didn't live like that now. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant became more than successful. It became rooted. Regulars brought friends, birthdays were celebrated there. One couple even asked if they could get engaged at the corner table by the window because that was where they'd had their first date. I said yes, of course. The night of the proposal, I stood near the kitchen doorway and watched as he knelt, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. The room held its breath. When she said yes, the applause came naturally, joy spilling out in waves. I felt it then, a deep, steady warmth in my chest. I had created a place where people felt safe to begin. That mattered to me more than any argument I'd ever won. Not everything was easy. There were nights when exhaustion hit me all at once, when the weight of responsibility pressed down hard, times when I wished I could share the burden with someone who understood the cost of building something from nothing. But even in those moments, I didn't regret my choice. Loneliness, I learned, is painful, but self-betrayal is worse. One Sunday morning, months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Irene at the grocery store. We stood in the produce aisle, surrounded by stacks of apples and oranges, both of us reaching for the same bag of lemons. She pulled her hand back first. We looked at each other for a long moment. She seemed smaller somehow, not weaker, just less armored. She said, "I hear the restaurant is doing well." Her voice flat but not sharp. "It is," I replied. "Thank you." She nodded. "Daniel eats there sometimes. He doesn't say much." "I imagine it's complicated," I said. Her mouth tightened, then relaxed. "I wanted that place to mean something else." "I know," I said gently. She hesitated. "I didn't know how to let him go." The words surprised me. I'm still learning how to hold things without squeezing the life out of them. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. "I hope you find peace," I said again, meaning it. She nodded once and walked away. I stood there holding my lemons, heart strangely light. I didn't need closure in the way I once thought I did. Life had a way of closing doors on its own when you stopped trying to force them open. That summer, I took my first real vacation in years. Nothing extravagant, just a small coastal town, a rented room overlooking the water, mornings spent walking barefoot along the shore. I brought a book I'd been meaning to read for a decade and finished it in 2 days. One evening, sitting on the sand as the sun dipped low, I thought about the woman I'd been at the beginning of this story. The woman who stood in her kitchen, keys in hand, smelling of garlic and hope, stunned by the man she loved telling her she didn't deserve what she'd built. I wished I could reach back through time and touch her shoulder. I would tell her this: "You are not selfish for wanting something that is yours. You are not cruel for refusing to give it away, and you are not difficult for insisting on being seen." When I returned home, I made one final change. I framed the original deed to the restaurant, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. It hung in my office, simple and understated. On days when decisions felt heavy, I'd glance at it and remember what I was capable of surviving. One evening, long after closing, I sat alone at a corner table with a cup of tea. The restaurant was quiet, chairs tucked in, lights low. Outside, the streetlights hummed softly. I listened to the silence and didn't feel afraid of it. This life wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic anymore, but it was honest, and honesty, I've learned, is the most nourishing thing of all. There is a quiet moment that comes after a storm, when the air feels washed clean and the world looks almost unfamiliar. That's where I am now. Not because everything turned out perfectly, not because I won something or proved someone wrong, but because I finally learned how it feels to live without constantly negotiating my worth. For a long time, I believed love was something you earned by giving more patience, more understanding, more of yourself. I believed that if I just explained better, softened my voice, waited longer, the people I loved would eventually see me. What no one tells you is that some people don't want to see you. They want to use you as a reflection of themselves. My husband didn't wake up one day and decide to betray me. His mother didn't suddenly become entitled overnight. This story wasn't born from cruelty. It was born from expectation, from a belief passed down quietly like an heirloom no one questions. That belief said, a woman's dreams are optional. A wife's labor is shared. A daughter-in-law's success belongs to the family, except to her. And for years, I played my part because it felt easier than disrupting the script, until the day my dream had a door, a set of keys, and my name on the paper. That's when the truth surfaced. Some people will support you only as long as your growth doesn't threaten their control. Some love feels warm until it realizes it can't own you. Walking away from my marriage wasn't a victory, it was a grief. I mourned the future I thought I was building, the version of my husband I believed in, the family I tried so hard to belong to. But I also mourned something else, the woman I might have become if I had given in. If I had signed that restaurant away, if I had told myself it was selfish to keep what I built, if I had agreed that my work mattered less than someone else's sense of entitlement, that woman would have lived quietly angry. She would have smiled through resentment. She would have learned how to disappear. And I loved myself too much, finally, to let that happen. What surprised me most wasn't the loss, it was the peace. Peace doesn't shout, it doesn't arrive with applause. It settles into your bones slowly, like something you were always meant to carry but didn't know how to hold. Peace looks like locking up your own business at night, like choosing paint colors without asking permission, like eating dinner alone and not feeling lonely. Peace is waking up and knowing no one gets to rewrite your story without your consent. If you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of a decision, one where you're being asked to give up something deeply yours to keep the peace, I want you to hear this clearly. Peace that requires your erasure is not peace. Family that demands your silence is not family. Love that punishes your growth is not love. You are allowed to choose yourself without becoming a villain. You are allowed to succeed without handing over the credit. You are allowed to build something and say, "This is mine." And if that makes someone uncomfortable, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the balance of power has shifted, and they can feel it. I didn't lose everything when my marriage ended. I lost the habit of shrinking, and in its place, I found something steadier than approval, louder than guilt, and stronger than fear. I found my voice. So I'll ask you what I asked myself standing alone in that kitchen all those months ago. If someone told you that your dream belonged to them instead of you, what would you do? Would you give it away to keep the peace? Or would you keep it and finally choose yourself? Tell me in the comments. I read every word. And if this story felt close to your heart, if it reminded you of a moment you're still carrying, you're not alone here. Subscribe, stay a while, and let's keep telling the truth, one story at a time. Sometimes, after everything has settled, after the doors have closed and the lights have dimmed, a story keeps breathing. It does that when the lesson hasn't finished unfolding. Months passed, then a year. The restaurant grew into itself the way people do when they stop apologizing for who they are. We added a small patio out back, nothing fancy, just a few tables and string lights. On warm evenings, laughter drifted into the alley, mingling with the smell of grilled vegetables and fresh bread. I would step outside sometimes just to listen, not to supervise, just to witness. I learned the shape of my days without Daniel in them. I learned which mornings I preferred quiet and which ones needed music. I learned that I liked my coffee stronger than I used to make it, that I enjoyed waking up early not because I had to, but because I wanted the head start. I learned that my body carried stress differently now, less tension in my jaw, fewer headaches, deeper sleep. Healing, I realized, wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about no longer organizing my life around it. There were still moments when old habits tried to return, moments when I caught myself explaining decisions that didn't require explanation, when I softened my no out of reflex, when I felt that old urge to keep the peace at my own expense. But now I noticed it, and noticing is power. One evening, after a particularly long shift, I sat at the bar with my manager counting receipts. She glanced at me and smiled. "You know," she said, "I worked for a lot of owners. Most of them lead with fear." I raised an eyebrow. "And me?" "You lead with trust," she said. "People feel that." Her words stayed with me all the way home. Trust. That was what I had rebuilt, not just with others, but with myself. Trust that when something felt wrong, it probably was. Trust that my instincts weren't selfish, just honest. Trust that I could survive the fallout of choosing myself. One afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail with Irene's handwriting on it. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short note. "I am downsizing. Daniel is helping me. I won't be coming by the restaurant anymore. I wanted you to know I understand now that what I wanted was never really about the business." There was no apology, no affection, but there was clarity. I folded the note carefully and placed it in a drawer, not as a keepsake, just as a marker, proof that even the most rigid stories can shift, if only slightly. Later that year, I spoke at a small local event for women in business. Nothing grand, just a circle of folding chairs and coffee in paper cups. Someone asked me how I found the courage to walk away. I thought about the question longer than they probably expected. "I didn't feel courageous," I said finally. "I felt cornered. Courage came later, after I realized I'd survived." There were nods around the room, quiet understanding. That's when I knew this story wasn't just mine. So many women live on the edge of their own lives, waiting for permission that never comes, waiting for someone to say, "Yes, you're allowed to want this." I wish I could sit with each of them and say it plainly. You don't need to be rescued to be worthy. You don't need to justify your dreams, and you don't need to make yourself smaller to be loved. One night after closing, I walked through the restaurant alone, touching the backs of chairs, straightening menus no one would read until morning. I paused at the window, looking out at the quiet street. I thought again of that first night, the smell of garlic on my coat, the way my hands shook when Daniel told me his mother deserved what I had built. I remembered how small I felt in that moment, and I felt a tenderness for that version of myself. She didn't know yet how strong she was. She didn't know that this pain would become a dividing line, the place where her life split into before and after. Before, waiting, explaining, shrinking. After, choosing, building, standing. If I could speak to her now, I wouldn't tell her to be brave. I would tell her to be honest. Honest about what she wanted. Honest about what hurt. Honest about what she could no longer give away.